there. I'm an explosive barrel, and I like to blow up. Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 sec. Yeah, it's XB, calling for Yogg-Sothoth. Explosive barrel. Seriously? B-A-R-R-E-L. No, do not put me on hold. God damn it, Susan. Yogg, baby, what's going on? No, I mean...
What the fuck is going on? We had a deal.
Relevant content? Motherfucker, do not say Fortnite or Minecraft to me. Bullshit. I broke out of the void for this. You said once you got the lewds, I'd be a star. You said you could manipulate causality. If you can do it for the Finger Family channels, you can do it for me. Oh, that's how it is. I'm the new unfathomable horror in town. I don't need you or Dad or Uncle Nyarlathotep.
I will amass an army of disciples, and they will...
Asshole. Anyway, let's talk about Slain, Back from Hell. This is usually the part where I flash the dev logo and espouse my sorrow at the lack of a Wikipedia page. But the game just starts. No logos, just a static image of the title. The game itself has a paragraph-long Wikipedia entry which isn't too positive, but that's beside the point. So I decided to do a little digging. I found their Kickstarter, but their link page is dead. I also found some pretty displeased backers in the comments, and I'd wager they never got the physical items they were promised. However, the publisher, Digerati Distribution, is still alive and well. Their old Kickstarter link is dead, but they do have a new site showcasing their library of indie games, and they're still pretty active on Twitter. I'm on Twitter now, by the way, so if that's your social media garbage fire of choice, you can find me there. I think the first thing to say about Slain is that it's
metal as fuck.
Slain uses heavy metal as a theme. Well, sort of. I'm not sure they know what a theme is because they allude to metal, but nothing ever comes of it. There's no greater use of heavy metal elements, just some nods in text and the fact that you can headbang over the corpses of the bosses you defeat, which I'll grant you is probably the tightest thing about the game. The soundtrack itself is worthy of mentioning as a standout part of the metal element. It's brutal and ethereal in the right places. It's not Andrew Holschultz or Mick Gordon, but it's got legs. I'm trying to view this through the lens of a 2016 release date before I jump to conclusions, so first let's talk about what you're getting. If you play from start to finish in one session, keeping your stride, this is a 3 or 4 hour title. You can hammer through it pretty fast. I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's worth noting. Everything in Slain is a pretty straightforward linear experience. There's nothing to explore and no real branching path, so it keeps itself firmly out of the Metroidvania category. Honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing. If I go into a game knowing my goal is to soldier through levels chopping down everything in my path, I'm totally fine with that. No harm, no foul. This brings us to the gameplay and level design, and this is where we really start to get into it. Slain doesn't go wild with its mechanics. You've got a standard attack and charge attack with your sword, and your mana attacks function the same way with the addition of a powerful radial blast attack which requires a full energy bar. Then you have your block system, which is really just a vehicle to employ the parry system. When you pull off a parry, an enemy will be momentarily open to a heavy attack which will refill your mana when an enemy is killed with it. The sword's charge attack also functions in the same way. Last, you have the ability to select damage types. regular, fire, and ice, which unlock as the game progresses. Everything on offer from the combat feels measured and no feature comes off as jammed in. I did think the parry felt a little stiff. Sometimes I just felt like the parry didn't happen despite doing the same thing I had just executed. Then again, I could just suck at nailing that perfect frame. Now I suppose it's time to get down to the meat of the game, the story and levels. You play as Batherin, resurrected from death by a spirit who says you must act as a guardian and save your children even though you insist you have no kids. Demons, led by Lord Vroll, are out to kick your ass, so on and so forth. Some of your bosses are straight up evil, some are twisted, impure versions of their former selves, and others are just protecting their turf. Story-wise, that's all I'm going to give you until the end, just in case you want to experience it for yourself. But be warned, here there be spoilers. The first area is the Blood Grounds.
Whoa! It's a good song title.
It's your standard tutorial level. You're introduced to the mechanics of the game by the old crone who loves eating bones for a reason that's never explained, and she'll be your guide throughout the entirety of Slain. Here, Slain establishes its traps, and the game gets a pass for the cheap kill because it gives you a trophy for it. There's little excuse for some of the other traps later on, but we'll get to that. It also introduces the Beholders, who are
Floating projectile dickheads.
After you get through the Thorn Woods,
Whoa! It's a good song title.
you face your first boss, the Thorn Beast. This is your starting taste of the heavier Castlevania mechanics. You learn the moves, you learn their patterns, dodge and then conquer. Again, you feel the love put into the bosses, and everything is structured to utilize skill that crests over casual level, but doesn't march into Souls-like territory. Next up is the Blood Tower, and it's your first purely platform-oriented level. The focus is perfecting the player's ability to make jumps, dodge and reflect projectiles, switch hunt, slight but not inconvenient backtracking, and killing flying enemies. For the most part, it's a tightly woven pattern with very few holes from a gameplay perspective. You're also gonna want to collect the pieces of your amulet as you progress. They're scattered throughout the levels in many boss alcoves. Trust me, you'll need it later. Once you complete this section, you're brought to Slain's very minor hub world and introduced to the crone in person for the first time. There's a bit of player choice as you can decide whether you want to go to the Highlands or the Wolf Woods. I chose the Highlands first as I'm a left to right player when it comes to completion. This is also a great example of where the soundtrack by Kirk Victor Bryant really hits the mournful metal tone of desolation, which blends with a background that I thought was notably striking. In the Highlands level, you unlock the flame damage type for your sword and mana. I found the background of this level a little dull, but the weather effect, which occurs simultaneously close and distanced in perspective, more than made up for it. You encounter a few more traps than instant death pits, but everything is pretty standard, right up until you reach the caves. Slain is fond of these endurance tests where you face off against multiple waves of enemies in a confined space. You probably have 2 or 3 of these minor endurance rounds up to this point, depending on the path you chose. But when you reach the caves, we get to my only real gameplay gripe in Slain. In this specific instance, I know I'm not alone because you can find this same sentiment in multiple forums on the net. The more cruel endurance rounds are less about skill and more about finding the exact sweet spot necessary to get through the rounds. Until you find that sweet spot, you will die, and die, and die,
And die, and die.
For example, here you might think it's all about blocking, but no, it's about ensuring that the energy projectile ghoul on one side is far enough out of range that its attack either doesn't trigger or dissipates before it reaches you. It's not that it's even wildly unfair or too hard, there are damageless runs out there that are amazing. It just becomes a rehearsed slog of health conservation so you can face the mini-bosses that spawn as the last wave. When you reach the Highlands Tower, the game ups the ante on its combination of platforming, traps, and projectile enemies racing to knock you into an instant death pit or to a lower part of the level. These sections are the endurance tests with real variety, where I found myself having the most fun. All of this platforming, trap maneuvering, and ghosty slaying culminates in a battle with the Banshee Queen. I free her and her shitty ghost children from eternal torment by way of an ass-kicking, and the Queen is very grateful. I hit the Wolf Woods next and unlock the Ice Power, which, unlike the Fire, does change the appearance of your weapon to a battle axe instead of a sword. I believe the strike rhythm is different as well, and I was the most fond of it in my playthrough. For me, this is where the enemies got a little tougher. The Wolfhead Guardians are as tanky as other mini-bosses, but they dump a lot of them on you here. If you're too far away from them, they'll spawn a pain-in-the-ass spectral wolf. But once you're in range and have the parry mastered, they aren't too bad on their own. If there's more than one, or you're dealing with a host of skeletons alongside them, I'd try to take out the Guardians first. You eventually meet up with the Spirit of the Pack, who transforms you into a wolf, triggering a scrolling chase sequence, which is probably one of the best moments in the game. After the chase, you're in the Wolf Caves, and it's a gauntlet of Wolfhead Guardians, traps, and platforming. It's relatively challenging, but it integrates some awkward spring platforming by way of bouncing off of boils on hands that can deal you damage. Then you're stuck with another endurance round, and all of this just felt like a slog. You learn the enemy patterns and parries, but you're still stuck finding that sweet spot again. By the end of it, I didn't feel relieved, I was just glad I'd never have to do that bullshit again. However, before I show myself headbanging over this asshole's corpse, I gotta point something out. Do not type "rah" in your dialogue. If you don't have a voice actor or a sound effect, just leave it out. Every player who has ever read it has read it as "rah." Once Lupus Rex was defeated, I took on the sewers, and it's the penultimate trap level. You're dealing with a lot of instant death traps. I had a little difficulty with these fuckers. I just missed their visual ground cues too many times. That's on me. But also, I hate them. I do have to nitpick a little. The game has a very clear sense of architecture. Very gothic, lots of cool naked lady statues and carvings of skeletons. However, trap-wise, what purpose do these obstacles serve in a land where the bad guy already rules and essentially all life is eliminated? And to that end, why don't these gear animations work in sync with one another?
It is driving my OCD crazy.
After all the traps are navigated, you face off against the Mother Beholder. And as far as challenge goes, it's the best fight in the game. Moving target, multiple projectiles, and it's a mobile enemy spawner. It's as close to blasphemous as Slain comes, if we're comparing it to contemporary titles. Old Town comes up next in the level roster, and I think this is where Slain loses a step. Every mechanic and nearly every enemy is revealed by this point. That's not to say that the environment isn't cool. The game has a certain charm in making underground areas contrast with top-level zones. But the main event becomes the bosses. And speaking of, it's time for the Ice Beast. This isn't a bad fight, but, and this is 100% on me, not on them, the boss did remind me of the Phantom Virus from Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase. Do with that what you will. The Great Hall ushers in the last parts of the game, and I have to admit, I forgot about the level entirely save for the intro of some relatively easy-to-beat fire shield enemies. The area itself is another platforming section with the slightly modified aesthetic of a previous dungeon. Again, the standout is the boss, Malakesh, which is a clever but not too difficult fight with a tiny imp that controls an invulnerable suit of armor. Castle Bridge lines up all the game's toughest elements in one go. Tons of mini-bosses, traps, platforming, and hordes of enemies. There's a particularly tough part where you have to face hordes of skeletons and 2 mini-bosses, and you have to be careful because... just kidding. Stand on a ledge and the skeletons will kill themselves trying to get to you and then kite the mini-bosses into a trap. By the way, if you want that trophy for killing enemies with traps, you're gonna have to farm it. Getting it naturally is unlikely. At the end of the level you face... I want to say Hogger, but I know it's Hoger, and I just don't like the way that word feels in my mouth.
Shut up, you're the weird one.
It's finally time for the fight with the big bad of the game, Lord Vrol. It's a 3-stage fight, which fortunately for more casual players does checkpoint between each phase. The first phase trots out all you've learned through the other boss fights. Everything here depends on changing the element of your weapon, perfect parries, and reflecting projectiles. For the second phase, this is where your amulet comes into play. It'll protect you from the fire when Vrol shapeshifts into a dragon. Again, reflect projectiles, dodge, and get your hits in. Finally, in the last stage, Vrol shapeshifts into a large-handed floating demon with an anus belly button. I mean, you do you, I guess. Anyway, hit him for mana, do mana bursts, dodge seeker projectiles, rinse and repeat for maximum murder. Then comes the story, and spoilers, this is where everything absolutely falls apart. You're Vrol's son, but here's the thing. The spirit awoke you saying that your children needed you. So I combed through the dialogue, and there's no mention of Batheron's kids. Either they cut lore from the re-release, it's in another game they don't directly reference, or they just outright fucked up and didn't go back to edit previous dialogue after plot changes. Then it hints at a space-based sequel of some sort and a to-be continued. I think this may be a reference to Valfaris, a game created by Steel Mantis, which according to Steam, also created Slain Back from Hell. That's right, I was trying to farm actually comments the entire time. Pretty weird though that this company consisting solely of the programmer and concept artist would claim ownership of the game under a different name after it was published and re-released to mostly positive reviews, but scrub all mention of the original Kickstarter development team, Wolf Brew Games. As I said, there's no dev logo anywhere and zero mention of Wolf Brew Games or Steel Mantis anywhere within the actual game, unless you go to the Digerati digital page for the Valeris Slain bundle, even though Valeris is published by Big Sugar. So there's some kind of rabbit hole here I don't care to go down. This could be a simple case of restructuring, or it could be dodging the sour taste of the initial release. That's for you to decide, I suppose. Now let's talk price. When this game debuted, it was priced at $14.99. I snagged my copy of Slain on sale for around $3, but according to PSN deals, it maintains that $15 price tag when it's not on PlayStation's sacrificial altar of deals. On Steam, the game is $13, but in my opinion, $13 to $15 is just too steep for the length of the experience. Slain Back from Hell is a good game. It's fun and delivers on exactly what it promises. But I would definitely wait for a sale. Remember, if you want to worship at the altar of the barrel, be sure to like, subscribe,
And don't forget to hit that bell.